The cowboy was shot in the chest in the mountains. She found him and dug the bullet out with her shah. Jack McAllister was a cowboy unlike any other on the Texas frontier. He lived in a small cabin near the edge of the open plains, where the land stretched endlessly under the wide blue sky. He had spent most of his life working with horses and cattle, riding long hours through the dry, dusty trails, and learning to read the subtle signs of nature, the tracks of animals, the whispers of wind, and the dark clouds that warned of storms. Jack was known among the nearby settlers for his strength and courage, but what truly set him apart was his heart. He had a sense of justice and kindness that made him willing to help anyone in need, even if it put him at risk. It was late autumn when the news reached Jack. The story came from a trader passing through the small settlement. 3 Comanche widows had been left alone after a violent raid had destroyed their village. They were said to be wandering the plains, struggling to survive in the cold, with little food and no shelter. Jack listened carefully as the trader described their plight. He imagined the women frightened and alone, with no one to protect them. Most people would have turned away, afraid of danger. But Jack felt a deep pull in his heart. He knew he had to do something. Jack prepared quickly. He packed his saddlebag with food, blankets, and basic supplies, everything he thought the women might need to survive the journey to safety. He checked his horse, a strong and loyal brown stallion named Apache, making sure the saddle was secure and the water supply was full. He rode out at dawn, the early sunlight glinting off his hat and casting long shadows on the ground. The wind was crisp, and the scent of earth and grass filled his lungs. As he rode, Jack thought about what he might find. The plains could be beautiful, but they were also dangerous. Wolves, snakes, and bandits could appear at any moment. Still, he felt no fear. He only thought of the women who needed his help. The ride was long and difficult. Jack followed the faint tracks reported by the trader, moving carefully through rough terrain. Some parts of the plains were open and easy to cross, but others were thick with shrubs and uneven ground. He had to guide Apache slowly, stepping over hidden rocks and avoiding holes. At night, he would rest under the stars, keeping watch for any danger. During these quiet moments, Jack thought about the lives of the widows. He didn't know their names yet, but he imagined them as brave and strong, like the Comanche women he had met in the past. He imagined them using the skills they had learned from their families, trying to find food and water, but struggling against the harshness of the land. After several days of riding, Jack finally spotted signs of human presence. He saw faint smoke rising in the distance, probably from a small fire. His heart quickened. He followed the smoke carefully, making sure he wasn't being watched by anyone who might wish them harm. As he got closer, he saw 3 figures sitting near the fire. They were women, just as the trader had described. Their clothes were worn and patched, and their faces showed exhaustion and worry. Jack's heart went out to them. He dismounted Apache quietly and approached slowly, raising a hand in greeting. The women looked up, startled at first. Their eyes widened when they saw a lone cowboy approaching. Jack spoke gently, introducing himself and explaining that he had come to help. He offered them food and water, and they hesitated at first, unsure if they could trust him. But something in Jack's calm and sincere manner made them relax. He had a way of showing respect, even to strangers, that made people feel safe. Over time, the women began to trust him, and they accepted his help. Jack felt a sense of relief and joy. He had found them, and now he could guide them to safety. The journey back was not easy. The women were weak from hunger and the cold, and Jack had to help them across streams, over rocks, and through thick brush. He carried some of their belongings and encouraged them with kind words. He listened to their stories, learning their names, Naya, Lila, and Taye, and understanding a little about the lives they had lost. He learned about the village they had loved, the families they had cared for, and the hardships they had faced since the raid. Each story made Jack feel even more determined to help them. He realized that their survival depended on more than just food and water. It depended on hope, trust, and the knowledge that someone cared. During the ride, Jack also observed how the women helped each other. Despite their grief, they supported one another with quiet strength. Naya carried the youngest supplies while Leela helped steady Taye when she stumbled. Their bond was clear, and Jack admired it deeply. He knew that helping them survive meant respecting not just their needs, but their spirit. He made sure to speak to them gently, to listen, and to act with patience. He never gave orders. Instead, he guided and assisted, letting them feel empowered even in their weakened state. As they neared the settlement, the landscape began to change. The plains opened into small fields and wooden cabins where families lived. The women's eyes brightened at the sight of civilization after days of traveling through the wilderness. They had survived the hardest part of the journey, and now safety was within reach. Jack felt a deep satisfaction, but he also knew this was only the beginning. Helping them survive was one thing. Helping them rebuild their lives would be the real challenge. Still, he felt ready. He had faced danger before, but he had never felt a purpose so clear and so meaningful. The widows were grateful, but they did not express it with words alone. Their trust, their cautious smiles, and the way they looked at Jack spoke volumes. For him, that trust was reward enough. He had saved lives, yes, but he had also formed a connection that went beyond simple rescue. It was a bond built on respect, courage, and shared humanity. That bond would guide the next steps of their journey together, shaping the story of how a cowboy's bravery could touch lives in ways he could never have imagined. As the sun set behind the hills, casting golden light over the settlement, Jack led the women to the safety of nearby cabins. He introduced them to people in the community who could help, and he ensured they had enough food and blankets to rest comfortably. For a moment he stood outside, looking over the plains he had crossed, feeling the wind on his face. He knew that while the journey had been difficult, it had also been meaningful. He had acted not for fame or reward, but because it was the right thing to do. And in that moment, Jack realized something important. Courage was not just about facing danger. It was about facing it with heart, with compassion, and with the willingness to help those who could not help themselves. Jack McAllister's story of that first rescue would not be told in newspapers or songs, but it would live in the lives of Naya, Lila, and Ty. It would live in the trust they placed in him, in the hope they regained, and in the bond they had formed with a cowboy who rode across the plains to save them. It was a beginning, a small spark of light in a harsh world, and it was only the start of a story that would change all of their lives. Jack McAllister knew that rescuing the 3 Comanche widows was only the beginning of their journey. Naya, Lila, and Taye was safe for the moment, but the harshness of the plains had left them weak, hungry, and scared. Jack understood that if they were to survive and rebuild their lives, they would need more than temporary help. They would need a guide, a protector, and someone who could earn their trust completely. And Jack was determined to be that person. The first challenge came almost immediately. While the widows were grateful for Jack's arrival, they were also cautious. Their eyes constantly scanned the horizon as if expecting danger to appear at any moment. Jack knew that the world had not been kind to them and that trust would have to be earned, step by step. He spoke gently to them, explaining that he had no intention of causing harm, and that his only goal was to help them find safety and comfort. Slowly they began to relax, leaning on him for guidance, without losing their dignity or pride. Jack's first priority was to ensure they had enough food. The plains had little to offer in the late autumn, and the cold mornings made hunger more painful. He taught the widows how to identify edible plants, how to track small animals, and how to set simple traps for rabbits or squirrels. He showed them how to gather water safely from streams and how to store it without contamination. At first, the women struggled. They had been accustomed to life in their village, where survival was a shared effort with family and community. But Jack's patience never wavered. He explained each step clearly, repeating instructions when needed, and he always offered encouragement. The journey to a safer settlement took several days, and during that time the bond between Jack and the widows deepened. They shared stories around the campfire each night, speaking softly so that the flames seemed to listen with them.
Naya told Jack about her life before the raid, describing the bright mornings in her village, the laughter of her family, and the songs that her mother used to sing.
Lila spoke about the skills she had learned as a hunter and gatherer, the ways her father had taught her to read the land, and the pride she felt in her people's traditions. Teye, the youngest of the three, shared her dreams for a life where she could help her community flourish again. Jack listened carefully, fascinated by the strength, resilience, and intelligence of these women. Even as they traveled, danger was never far away. One evening, as the group made camp near a small creek, Jack spotted fresh wolf tracks near the water. He immediately moved the widows away from the area and set up a small perimeter to protect their camp. The women watched him silently, understanding the seriousness of the situation. Jack did not panic. He had faced threats like this before. Instead, he acted with calm precision, teaching them how to stay alert and how to move quietly to avoid attracting predators. That night, as the stars sparkled above them, the widows slept more peacefully, reassured by Jack's presence and knowledge. The emotional toll of their past traumas was another challenge. The widows had witnessed violence and loss that left scars deeper than any wound on the body. Sometimes, as they walked, Naya would pause and stare into the distance, her eyes reflecting memories she could not forget. Lila would hum a soft tune, trying to comfort herself, and Tay would hold back tears until she thought no one was watching. Jack noticed these moments and never forced them to speak if they weren't ready. Instead, he shared small comforts, a warm blanket, a cup of water, a gentle word that reminded them they were not alone. He knew that healing required patience, respect, and understanding, and he provided all three freely. On the fourth day of travel, a sudden storm swept across the plains. Dark clouds rolled in quickly, bringing heavy rain and strong winds. Jack quickly found shelter under a small rocky outcrop, and he helped the widows cover themselves with blankets and hides. The wind howled and lightning flashed across the sky, but Jack remained calm, reassuring them with steady words and actions.
"We'll be fine," he said, his voice firm but kind. "We just need to stay together." The women clung to his guidance, feeling safer with him by their side.
That night, as the rain fell in sheets, Jack kept watch while the widows slept, proving that his courage was not only for show, it was real, and it came from the heart. As the storm passed, the group faced another challenge: crossing a swollen river. The current was strong, and the rocks were slippery. Jack carefully tested each step and then guided the widows across, holding their hands and encouraging them with calm, steady words. He made sure each of them felt capable, even though the situation was dangerous. When they finally reached the other side, laughter and relief broke the tension. The widows realized that Jack's courage was matched by his compassion. He did not rush them or belittle their fears. He moved with them, protecting them while allowing them to feel empowered. By the time they reached the small frontier settlement, Jack had earned the complete trust of Naya, Leela, and Tai. The settlement was a modest cluster of wooden cabins, with smoke rising from chimneys and children playing in the open yards. The widows looked at the community with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Jack led them carefully, introducing them to the people he trusted would help. Some villagers were skeptical at first, unsure about strangers from the plains, but they soon saw the widow's strength and Jack's sincerity. Slowly, Naya, Lila, and Taya began to feel a sense of safety that had been absent for many months. Jack continued to teach them essential skills. He helped them set up small shelters, showed them how to tend a small garden, and taught them to care for animals. He encouraged them to share their knowledge as well, so that the settlement could benefit from their experience. The widows proved to be quick learners and resilient workers. Naya took charge of planting and harvesting, Lila managed the care of animals, and Taya helped with cooking and household tasks. Together with Jack's guidance, they began to rebuild not just their lives, but their confidence and independence. Despite the hardships, there were moments of laughter and joy. Around the campfire at night, Jack and the widow shared stories and songs. Lila taught Jack a few traditional tunes, and he tried to sing along, often stumbling over the words. Naya laughed, Taya giggled, and for a few hours, the trauma and fear of the past seemed to fade. Jack realized that healing was not just about survival. It was about connection, shared experiences, and moments of simple happiness. Those nights by the fire created bonds that went deeper than gratitude. They were friendships born of trust, courage, and shared struggle. As days turned into weeks, the widows began to regain their strength. They were no longer the scared, weary women Jack had first found on the plains. They moved with confidence, their faces no longer haunted by fear. Jack watched them with pride, knowing that his role was not just to protect, but to empower. The widow's resilience inspired him in return, showing him that courage could take many forms, both in saving lives and in rebuilding them. Jack also reflected on the lessons he had learned. He realized that true bravery was not only about facing danger, but about patience, empathy, and unwavering support. He had risked his life for the widows, yes, but he had also grown in understanding of human strength and compassion. He had seen firsthand that kindness, when combined with courage, could create bonds that were stronger than fear and loss. And he knew that the story of their journey was far from over. By the time the widows were fully settled, Jack had become more than a rescuer. He was a friend, a guide, and a trusted presence in their lives. The settlement had welcomed them, but it was Jack who had led them through the wilderness, shielded them from danger, and helped them regain hope. Naya, Leela, and Taya never forgot his bravery, nor did they forget the kindness and respect he had shown. That foundation of trust would shape the next part of their story, as they began to imagine ways to repay his courage, not with gold or possessions, but with something far more meaningful: gratitude, loyalty, and eventually, a surprising plan that would forever change their lives. Jack McAllister's rescue of the 3 Comanche widows was more than an act of bravery. It was a story of connection, resilience, and hope. In the face of harsh winds, storms, and past traumas, he had led them to safety and helped them reclaim their strength. The bond formed during those days on the plains was unbreakable, a testament to the power of courage, compassion, and the human spirit. The journey they had shared was only the beginning, but it had already proven that even in the wildest lands, trust and kindness could light the darkest paths. After several weeks in the settlement, Jack McAllister had not only rescued Naya, Lila, and Tay from the dangers of the plains, but he had also helped them find their footing in a world that had once seemed unforgiving. The widows were growing stronger and more confident, and the settlement's people had begun to accept them. Yet, there was something more profound developing. A bond between the four of them that went beyond simple gratitude. It was a friendship built on trust, shared hardships, and respect for one another's strength and character. Every morning, Jack and the widows would rise with the sun. Jack would ride out to check on the cattle and the small plots of land he had helped them cultivate, while Naya, Lila, and Taye would tend to their own tasks. Naya focused on organizing food supplies, ensuring that nothing went to waste. Lila helped with animals, feeding the chickens and goats, while Ty assisted the neighbors in small chores, slowly gaining confidence in social interactions she had once feared. Jack often worked alongside them, not out of obligation, but because he genuinely enjoyed their company. The quiet moments of laughter and conversation during work brought a sense of normalcy to their days, a stark contrast to the chaos they had endured before. As the days passed, the widows began to share more of their personal stories with Jack. One afternoon, as they sat together outside their small cabin, Naya spoke of her family. She described her late husband with warmth and pride, remembering the kindness and bravery he had shown during difficult times. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she also smiled at the memories. Jack listened quietly, offering comfort without judgment. He did not attempt to replace the family they had lost. He simply acknowledged their pain and validated their memories. Lila shared stories of the traditions she had grown up with, the songs, dances, and ceremonies that had once filled her village with life. She spoke of the way the people of her community celebrated the changing seasons, honored their elders, and taught the young to respect the land. Jack found himself fascinated by the depth of her knowledge and the pride she took in her culture. He asked questions, not out of curiosity alone, but because he wanted to understand and honor their heritage. In turn, the widows appreciated his interest, seeing in him someone who respected their past rather than dismissed it. Ty, the youngest of the three, was more quiet at first. She had suffered great loss and often retreated into herself, afraid that speaking about her feelings would bring more pain. But Jack's gentle patience gave her the courage to open up. She told him about her dreams of creating a home where people could find safety, where traditions could live on, and where kindness could flourish. Jack encouraged her, reminding her that the strength she had shown during their journey across the plains was a sign of her resilience. Slowly, she began to smile more, laugh more, and even take initiative in helping the settlement's people. The bond between Jack and the widows grew stronger not only through conversation but also through shared challenges. One day, a sudden sickness spread among the settlement's animals. Lila panicked at first, unsure how to save the chickens and goats. But Jack calmly guided her through the steps to isolate the sick animals, provide care, and prevent further spread. Naya helped by preparing food for the healthy animals and keeping their living spaces clean, while Taye assisted with carrying water and supplies. Together, under Jack's guidance, they solved the problem. The experience taught them the power of cooperation, and the widows realized that Jack's leadership was not about domination. It was about partnership, support, and shared responsibility. The emotional support Jack offered was just as important as the practical help. Sometimes memories of their past would weigh heavily on the widows, and they would retreat to quiet corners or stare into the distance, lost in thought. Jack never forced conversation. Instead, he offered a presence that was steady and reliable. He would sit beside them, sometimes speaking softly, sometimes letting the silence speak for itself. His patience and understanding allowed them to process their grief and begin to heal. Over time, the widows began to smile without fear, to laugh without hesitation, and to embrace life again, even in the shadow of their losses. The community, too, began to notice the changes. Neighbors who had once been skeptical of the widows' arrival saw their resilience and strength. They watched as the widows contributed to the settlement, shared their knowledge, and formed meaningful connections with other residents. Many villagers came to respect Jack not only for his bravery in rescuing them, but also for the kindness, patience, and respect he had shown in helping them rebuild their lives. Word of his actions spread quietly, and Jack became known as a man who could be trusted in both peril and peace. During this time, the widows began to consider ways they could express their gratitude. They did not speak of material gifts or money. Instead, they thought about how they could honor Jack in a way that reflected both his courage and their own values. The idea of a repayment began to take shape, not as a simple transaction, but as a meaningful act that could symbolize the bond they had formed. Though they did not discuss it openly at first, each of them considered how Jack had changed their lives. They realized that the greatest gift he had given them was not safety alone. It was hope, confidence, and the ability to imagine a future beyond survival. Jack, meanwhile, was unaware of the plans forming in their minds. He focused on his daily routines, helping the widows in the community, never imagining that they would consider repaying him in a way that went beyond gratitude. He found satisfaction in their progress, in their laughter, and in the small victories of everyday life. Yet he could sense a subtle change in their demeanor, an energy of anticipation and care that he did not fully understand. He accepted it as part of the deepening friendship, unaware that the widows were already planning something extraordinary. Despite the calm and routine, life on the frontier was never entirely predictable. Jack and the widows continued to face challenges, from sudden storms to illness, from wild animals to disputes within the settlement. Each obstacle became an opportunity to strengthen their trust and cooperation. Jack showed the widows that courage was not about never fearing danger. It was about facing challenges with patience, wisdom, and compassion. The widows, in turn, demonstrated resilience, resourcefulness, and strength, earning the respect of everyone around them. Together they formed a remarkable team, balancing each other's strengths and weaknesses, and finding harmony in their shared efforts. And, as the weeks turned into months, the widows began to see Jack not only as a protector and friend, but as someone who embodied the values they admired most: integrity, courage, and unwavering compassion. They spoke quietly among themselves about how fortunate they were to have met him, and how deeply they wanted to honor him in return. It was during one quiet evening, as they sat by the fire sharing stories and listening to the wind rustle through the trees, that the idea took shape. They would repay Jack, not with material wealth, but with something symbolic and meaningful. They would offer him a gift that reflected their culture, their respect, and their gratitude, a gift that would surprise him and forever change their relationship. Even as this plan developed in their minds, the bond between Jack and the widows continued to grow in small, everyday ways. Jack noticed how they laughed more freely, how they worked together seamlessly, and how they took pride in their accomplishments. He began to realize that the rescue had led to something far greater than he had expected. It was not just about saving lives. It was about creating a community, a sense of belonging, and the ability to trust and care for one another. Jack saw in the widows a strength and wisdom that inspired him, and he felt grateful for the connection they had formed. By the end of this period, the widows were no longer just survivors. They were empowered women, capable of managing their lives and contributing meaningfully to the settlement. Jack's guidance had helped them rebuild not only their physical safety, but also their emotional and social stability. The foundation had been laid for something extraordinary. The widows' gratitude, combined with their admiration for Jack, was growing into a thoughtful and heartfelt plan, a plan that would soon come to fruition, in a way that none of them could have imagined when Jack first rode across the plains to rescue them. In this chapter of their lives, the story was no longer only about hardship or survival. It was about friendship, trust, and the quiet strength that grows when people work together with respect and care. Jack McAllister had not only saved the widows' lives, but had also helped them discover hope again, and the widows, in their own thoughtful and creative way, were preparing to show him that his courage and kindness would never be forgotten. Their bond, tested and strengthened through trials, was about to lead them toward a future filled with unexpected surprises, unity, and the beginnings of something truly remarkable. Life in the settlement had become steady and predictable for Jack McAllister and the three Comanche widows, but beneath that calm, something remarkable was beginning to take shape. Naya, Lila, and Ty had grown stronger, more confident, and more self-reliant. They no longer saw themselves only as survivors of a tragedy. They were now women capable of rebuilding their lives and contributing meaningfully to the community. Yet their hearts carried a quiet desire. They wanted to repay the man who had saved them, not with material wealth, but with something far more profound, a gesture of deep respect and gratitude. Jack, unaware of the thoughts swirling in their minds, continued his routine with the same diligence and kindness as always. He checked on the animals each morning, ensured the widow's supplies were sufficient, and offered guidance whenever it was needed. He never sought recognition or reward for his actions. For him, helping Naya, Lila, and Taya had been a matter of principle, an instinctive response to those in need. Yet the widows had noticed the sacrifices he had made, the long hours spent traveling, the risks he had taken alone across the plains, the careful thought he put into every decision to keep them safe. They understood that his bravery was accompanied by a rare and gentle compassion, and they felt a growing desire to honor him in a meaningful way. One evening, after a long day of work, the widows gathered quietly in their small cabin to discuss their plan. Naya spoke first, her voice soft but determined. "We cannot repay Jack with money," she said, "because what he gave us cannot be measured in gold or silver. We must honor him in a way that reflects our gratitude and our respect."
Lila nodded.
"We can offer him something that unites us, something symbolic, something that shows he has changed our lives forever." Ty, the youngest, smiled quietly, the first flicker of excitement in her eyes. "We can plan a ceremony," she suggested, "something that celebrates courage, kindness, and the bond we share. A wedding, in our way." Though unconventional, it felt deeply right to the widows. They knew that Jack was a man of principle, and they wanted to create a gesture that reflected the depth of their gratitude without imposing on him. They began to discuss how it could work, thinking carefully about traditions, customs, and Jack's own character. It was a plan born out of respect, humility, and creativity, a way to honor the man who had risked his life for theirs. Each widow contributed her ideas, drawing on her own knowledge of Comanche customs, while also considering how to blend them with the frontier traditions that Jack held dear. The planning was not easy. They needed to balance their desires with Jack's comfort and values. They did not want to startle him or make him feel obligated. Instead, they aimed to create an event that would symbolize unity, trust, and mutual respect. Naya took responsibility for the ceremonial aspects, thinking about symbols and rituals that would honor courage and loyalty. Lila focused on the practical details, gathering supplies, preparing food, and ensuring that the ceremony would be meaningful but simple. Taye worked on personal touches, small gestures that would reflect Jack's kindness and the gratitude they felt in their hearts. Together, the three women worked quietly, building a plan that was as thoughtful as it was extraordinary. As the weeks passed, the widows began to subtly prepare for the moment when they would present their idea to Jack. They organized small tokens, wrote messages of gratitude, and practiced simple rituals in private. All the while, Jack remained unaware, focused on his daily responsibilities and the well-being of the settlement. He continued to teach the widows skills he thought would be useful, often sharing stories of his own past experiences. He spoke of life on the plains, of the hardships he had faced, and of the importance of courage, honesty, and empathy. The widows listened attentively, absorbing not only his knowledge, but the values he exemplified in every action. The day finally arrived when the widows decided to reveal their plan. They invited Jack to their cabin after the work was done, asking him to sit and rest while they attended to a special preparation. Jack, unaware of what was coming, agreed with his usual good-natured trust. He watched as the women moved with quiet purpose, arranging flowers, preparing food, and decorating the space with simple but meaningful touches. The room was filled with warmth, light, and the subtle aroma of herbs and baked bread. Jack began to sense that something significant was about to happen, though he did not yet understand the full scope of their plan. When everything was ready, the widows sat together, holding Jack's hands in a gesture of trust. Naya spoke first, her voice calm but firm. "Jack, you saved our lives when we had no one else to turn to," she said. "You faced danger and hardship for our sake, and you gave us hope when we had lost it all. We cannot repay you with gold or possessions, but we want to honor you in a way that reflects our hearts." Lila added, "We want to celebrate the bond we have formed, the courage you showed, and the respect you have given us. We wish to offer you a wedding, not in the way you might expect, but as a symbol of gratitude, unity, and friendship." Jack's eyes widened in surprise. He had never anticipated such an act. He paused, trying to comprehend what the widows were suggesting. A wedding? For gratitude? It was an idea unlike anything he had ever encountered. He opened his mouth to speak, but the widows gently silenced him. "Listen, Jack," Tai said softly. "This is not about obligation. It is about honor, respect, and the bond we share. It is our way of showing that your courage has changed our lives forever." Jack was deeply moved. He realized that this gesture was far more than a simple ceremony. It was a testament to the human spirit, to gratitude, and to the extraordinary relationships that could form through trust and compassion. He understood that the widows were offering him something priceless: their respect, their friendship, and their hearts. He nodded slowly, finally finding the words. I don't know what to say," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "This is more than I ever imagined. I don't deserve such honor, but I am humbled, and I am grateful for your trust and friendship." The widows smiled, and the atmosphere in the cabin shifted from surprise to joy. They began the ceremony, blending Comanche customs with frontier traditions in a way that was respectful and beautiful. Simple rituals honored courage, protection, and loyalty. Small symbols represented unity and the bond between Jack and the widows. They shared stories, laughter, and tears, acknowledging not just the past, but the present moment and the hope of the future. Jack participated with humility, understanding that this celebration was about connection and gratitude, not ownership or possession. Neighbors who had been quietly observing from outside the cabin soon joined in, bringing small gifts of food and flowers, not to overshadow the ceremony, but to honor the meaning behind it. The community recognized the extraordinary nature of the bond between Jack and the widows and celebrated the courage, trust, and kindness that had brought them together. The ceremony was simple, yet profound, reflecting values that transcended words. It was a moment that would remain etched in memory for all who witnessed it. As the evening ended, Jack reflected on the events with a deep sense of gratitude himself. He realized that rescuing the widows had led to a bond unlike any he had experienced before, a bond built on courage, respect, and shared humanity. The widows had repaid him in a way that no material wealth ever could, through love, friendship, and trust. The gesture touched him more deeply than he could have imagined. He saw that the true reward of his actions was not recognition or thanks, but the relationships he had helped create. In the following days, life continued in the settlement, but there was a new sense of harmony. Jack and the widows worked together, laughed together, and continued to learn from one another. The ceremony had strengthened their bond and created a foundation of mutual respect that would guide them through future challenges. Jack realized that heroism was not just about saving lives in moments of danger. It was about nurturing relationships, fostering trust, and helping others find strength within themselves. Through it all, the widows remained thoughtful and wise. They never lost sight of the values Jack had exemplified: courage, compassion, and integrity. They understood that the ceremony was not an end, but a continuation of the journey they had begun together. It was a symbol of everything they had shared: the hardships, the lessons, the laughter, and the hope for the future. And Jack, for his part, cherished the bond they had formed, knowing that it was rare and precious, built on experiences that would last a lifetime. The story of Jack McAllister and the three Comanche widows had reached a turning point. What began as an act of bravery and kindness had blossomed into something far greater: a celebration of human connection, respect, and trust. The ceremony, unconventional as it might have seemed, reflected the extraordinary nature of their relationship, a relationship that had grown from the shared challenges of survival into a bond that would forever change their lives. The widow's thoughtful gesture had shown Jack that the true value of courage lay not only in protecting others, but in inspiring hope, unity, and gratitude. After the extraordinary ceremony, life in the settlement continued, but there was a new sense of warmth and unity that had never existed before. Jack McAllister, the rugged cowboy who had crossed the plains to save three widows, now stood at the center of a community that respected him not only for his courage, but for the integrity and kindness he had shown every day. Naya, Lila, and Taya had regained their confidence and independence, and they now shared a bond with Jack that went far beyond gratitude. They shared friendship, trust, and mutual respect that would last a lifetime. The widows, having carefully planned the wedding-like ceremony, took pleasure in seeing the joy and surprise on Jack's face during the event. They had worked quietly for weeks, blending their Comanche traditions with frontier practices in a way that honored him without overwhelming him. The result had been a celebration of courage, kindness, and unity, a true reflection of the lives they had shared and the bond they had formed. It was a moment that symbolized more than just gratitude. It symbolized the triumph of trust and the power of human connection in a world that could often be harsh and unforgiving. Jack, for his part, was deeply moved. He had never expected such an act of kindness or thoughtfulness. He realized that the gesture was not just about repayment, it was about recognition of the heart, soul, and courage that he had put into helping them. And yet, he also recognized that he had received far more than he had given. The widow's friendship, loyalty, and trust were treasures that no gold or wealth could replace. Jack's life, once focused solely on survival and routine, had now been enriched by relationships that brought meaning, joy, and purpose.
In the days following the ceremony, the settlement itself seemed to transform.
The other villagers watched with admiration as Jack and the widows worked together in harmony. They shared tasks, taught each other skills, and celebrated small victories together. Naya managed the household, teaching neighbors the ways of efficiency and organization she had learned in her own community. Lila contributed her knowledge of animal care and land management, and Tay offered encouragement, creativity, and energy wherever it was needed. Jack continued to guide them, not as a master but as a partner, sharing responsibility, wisdom, and care. Together, they also began to plan for the future. They discussed how to improve the settlement, make life easier for its residents, and help other travelers or displaced people who might arrive. The widow's presence had brought a sense of hope and resilience to the community. Their experiences had taught them to survive and to adapt, and they were now eager to share these lessons with others. Jack admired their courage and resourcefulness, seeing in them not just the women he had saved, but equals, strong, capable, and wise. The bond between Jack and the widows deepened in subtle ways. They shared laughter during daily chores, comforted each other in moments of sorrow, and celebrated achievements together, both big and small. Jack learned to understand their subtle gestures and expressions, recognizing the trust and affection that had grown silently over time. The widows, in turn, saw Jack's unwavering support and gentle guidance as a source of strength and inspiration. Their connection had become something rare and beautiful, built not on obligation but on respect, gratitude, and shared experience. One morning, as Jack tended the cattle, he noticed Naya, Lila, and Taya approaching with baskets full of flowers and herbs. They had carefully gathered them from the surrounding plains, arranging them in simple but beautiful patterns. "For you," Naya said, smiling, "to remind you that you are part of our lives, as we are part of yours." Jack accepted the gift with a humble nod, touched by the thoughtfulness behind it. He realized that their gestures of gratitude extended far beyond the ceremony. They were woven into the fabric of everyday life, small acts that carried immense meaning. The settlement's children also began to grow close to the widows, seeing them as role models and teachers. Naya would read to the young ones, telling stories from her past and encouraging curiosity. Lila showed them how to care for animals and observe the land, while Tay taught simple songs and crafts. Jack watched these interactions with quiet pride, realizing that his initial act of bravery had grown into something much larger, a ripple effect of courage, kindness, and learning that spread throughout the community. Jack also took time to reflect on his own life. He had spent years traveling, working with cattle, and living a solitary existence. The rescue of the widows had begun as a duty, but it had transformed his world. He had learned that true courage was not measured only by facing physical danger, but by nurturing relationships, showing empathy, and committing to the well-being of others. The widows had reminded him of the importance of trust, hope, and the quiet strength that emerges when people face hardship together. Months passed, and the settlement continued to thrive. The widows had fully integrated into the community, earning respect not only for their resilience but for their wisdom and generosity. Jack remained a steady presence, always available to offer guidance, protection, or encouragement. The bond between them remained the foundation of their lives together. While the wedding-like ceremony had been a symbolic act, it had created a lasting connection that strengthened with each shared experience. Their story became a quiet legend in the settlement, a tale of bravery, gratitude, and the extraordinary power of human connection. One afternoon, Jack and the widows decided to host a small celebration for the community. It was not extravagant, but it reflected the simple joys they had come to cherish: good food, laughter, music, and stories shared around a warm fire. The settlement gathered, neighbors bringing small gifts, songs, and food to contribute. Jack and the widows welcomed everyone with warmth, and the event became a symbol of unity, trust, and mutual respect. It was a celebration of survival, of friendship, and of the bonds that had been forged in the most challenging of circumstances. During the celebration, Jack took a quiet moment to observe the scene. He saw the smiles on the faces of the widows, the laughter of children, and the camaraderie of the villagers. He realized that this moment, born out of an act of courage, had created a ripple of positivity and hope that extended far beyond the initial rescue. Naya, Lila, and Taya had not only repaid him for saving their lives, they had reminded everyone present of the importance of kindness, courage, and trust in a world that could often be uncertain. As the sun set over the settlement, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Jack reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the moment he rode across the plains to rescue 3 widows, to the moments of hardship, laughter, and learning, he had witnessed the strength of the human spirit. He understood that his courage had been meaningful, not because of the danger he faced, but because it had inspired hope, trust, and friendship. The widows' thoughtful gestures and their wedding-like plan had been the ultimate expression of gratitude, a way of honoring not just Jack, but the values he represented. In the quiet of the evening, the 4 of them, Jack, Naya, Leela, and Taya, sat together outside their cabin. They shared stories, laughter, and moments of reflection. There was no need for words to express the depth of their bond. It was evident in the trust, respect, and care they had for one another. Jack realized that this was the true reward of his actions. Relationships forged through courage and kindness, bonds that would endure long after the challenges of the past had faded. The story of Jack McAllister and the 3 Comanche widows became more than a tale of rescue. It became a story of hope, resilience, and the extraordinary power of human connection. In a world filled with uncertainty and danger, Jack's courage had sparked a chain of events that not only saved lives, but also created lasting bonds, a thriving community, and a legacy of trust and compassion. The widow's thoughtful plan had been a symbol of gratitude and respect, but it had also been a reminder that true bravery lies in the heart, and that kindness can change lives in ways no one could predict. As night fell over the settlement, the fire flickering and casting warm light on the faces of those gathered, Jack knew that the journey was far from over. Life on the frontier would continue to bring challenges, storms, and hardships, but he also knew that together with Naya, Lila, and Taya, he had built something enduring, a community rooted in courage, trust, and care. And that, he realized, was more valuable than anything else in the world. Jack's life had been transformed, not only by the act of rescuing 3 widows, but by the friendship, loyalty, and gratitude that had grown from that act. The settlement had become a place of hope, a place where courage and kindness were honored, and where bonds forged through adversity could flourish. And the 3 widows who had once faced unimaginable loss had found not only safety, but a family, a home, and a way to express their gratitude in a manner as extraordinary as the man who had saved them. Jack McAllister, the cowboy with a heart as brave as his actions, had not only rescued lives but had helped nurture hope and unity. Naya, Lila, and Taya had repaid him with a gesture of deep meaning, one that would forever remind them and the community that courage, kindness, and gratitude could create bonds stronger than any hardship. Their journey had begun in fear and uncertainty, but it ended in trust, respect, and the quiet joy of human connection, a story that would live in their hearts forever.